Iran is already looking for a way out of the ceasefire agreement. While the White House announced that Iran had signaled that it would hand over its enriched uranium, the White House spokeswoman said that this is a red line for which President Donald Trump will not retreat. The Revolutionary Guards are furious and are threatening to withdraw from the negotiations. They announced that only fire will educate you. Wait for it. End quote. And meanwhile, a dramatic elimination in Lebanon. The IDF eliminated the secretary and nephew of the Secretary General of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, Ali Youssef Harashi, the personal secretary of Hezbollah's Secretary General. And at this moment, the precise elimination and the operation of the Israeli Air Force continues. And on the front of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the residents of Tehran woke up to a ceasefire morning and discovered that the condition of the city is severe after Israel's bombings. It appears at the moment that Iran is working to rebuild military capabilities. On the other hand, the IDF is prepared for the immediate renewal of fighting and is increasing offensive capabilities in Lebanon against Hezbollah targets. Despite Trump's words, Iran says that it will not agree to nuclear restrictions. And right now, Iran has not opened the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has begun demanding payments in Bitcoin from tankers and is also threatening to attack them. So, is the ceasefire actually misleading? In the IDF, they are revealing the real picture, and the preparations are in full swing. All the details coming up real soon. The current ceasefire is giving Israel critical time to rearm and return to routine, while Iran is trying to recover from the heavy damage of this war. Trump threatened ahead of the negotiations that are expected tomorrow in Pakistan. He said, "The fighting will resume if the agreement is not honored." And here, the question is asked, who really decides in Tehran? Who are the inner circles that run Iran? We will bring you who in the Revolutionary Guards decides whether to continue with the agreement or to renew this war. The IDF struck a central crossing that Hezbollah used to cross the Litani River. Is the Lebanese army assisting Hezbollah? A dramatic turnaround at the United Nations. The United States is considering withdrawing forces from NATO members that did not help it in the war against Iran. Iran tried to trip up Israel at the United Nations, but as usual, we crushed them. A huge achievement for Israel. Iran has gone into a deficit of $150 billion, and that is just the small money. Since this morning, around 30 launches from Lebanon into Israel by Hezbollah have been counted. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu officially announced that we will continue to strike Hezbollah, the terrorist organization in Lebanon. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and together we are boots on the ground and we bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what is happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of day 41 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. The ceasefire between the United States, Iran, and Israel, which was set for 2 weeks, allows the sides to exchange draft agreements through the mediator, Pakistan. Look, commentators from the wall to wall keep babbling nonstop about the process, but the truth is that very few people know what is really happening behind closed doors between the United States and Iran. And meanwhile, Lebanon is outside the agreement, which allows the IDF to continue operating to destroy commanders and also terror bases. So, we will continue to update you on what we know. And over the last 24 hours, the IDF has eliminated dozens of Hezbollah terrorists and blocked a Hezbollah buildup. It all began yesterday when the Israeli Air Force carried out Operation Eternal Darkness in Lebanon, in which hundreds of Hezbollah terrorists were eliminated and around 100 locations were attacked simultaneously within 10 minutes in order to prevent the terrorists from escaping. The idea behind the operation was to choose a point in time when those operations and the rooms, the headquarters, the safe apartments, and also the waiting rooms before taking out an activity would be staffed by a very large number of operatives. This is including the personnel secretary of Naim Qassem. Listen to this. The long arm of the IDF reaches the office of Hezbollah's Secretary General, and it is now becoming clear that yesterday, Ali Youssef Harassi, the right-hand man of Qassem, Hezbollah's Secretary General, was eliminated in a targeted strike in the Lebanese capital. At the same time, the Air Force destroyed overnight 2 strategic crossings that were used to transfer thousands of missiles and also rockets from the south of the Litani, not far from the border with Israel. Dozens of weapons depots and also terrorist headquarters were destroyed in southern Lebanon. After that, around 70 Hezbollah terrorists were eliminated by Brigade 215. The paratroopers also contributed with their fighters that are operating under Division 98. They also eliminated more than 60 terrorists. And according to the IDF, the fighters managed to achieve operational control in the area and continue to strike terrorist infrastructure. This is in order to strengthen the forward defensive lines and remove the threat to the residents of the north. Yesterday, the IDF struck more than 100 targets throughout Lebanon, and despite the ceasefire, Iran is working to rebuild military capabilities. The IDF is prepared for the immediate renewal of the fighting and is increasing offensive activities in Lebanon against Hezbollah targets. The American president referred to the negotiations and claimed that, according to the most likely scenario, the United States and Iran will sign a deal and carry it out. However, he made it clear that, for the time being, American forces will remain in this region, and he warned Iran, if for any reason an agreement is not signed, the fire will begin, and it will be stronger. Trump wrote. The frustration in the United States over Iran's demands is rising, and Trump's anger at the Revolutionary Guards in Iran is so great that yesterday he wrote about them. Frauds are spreading lies about the agreements. And yesterday, the media in Iran published a 10-point plan that was delivered to Washington, demands that are very far from the conditions of the White House. While the United States and Israel are using the pause to return to routine and to rearm, the head of Iran's judiciary is calling to accelerate executions amongst the Iranian people. Reports from Tehran reveal disgraceful conditions in Evin prison, welding shut cell doors and sealing detainees inside, and also live fire at prisoners. Assessments in Iran show that the economic losses from the war are leaving the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. The war that Israel and the United States have waged against Iran over the past 6 weeks has brought Iran many losses, including economic losses that are estimated at between $140 and $145 billion. In addition, US President Donald Trump announced a dramatic and unprecedented economic sanction directed against Iran's weapons and their technology suppliers. In a sharp post that he published on his social media network, Trump declared that all goods imported from those countries into the United States would face an immediate taxes of 50%. A sharp diplomatic campaign, but it failed. Israel was elected to all the committees, including the status of women, in what was seen in Israel as a significant diplomatic achievement. This is in the United Nations. The United States is considering withdrawing forces from NATO members, and they did not help in this war. So that's why they should be punished. Countries including France, Italy, and Spain restricted or blocked American use of their bases during the campaign against Iran. And if the decision goes tomorrow and it goes through, they will be negatively affected by these consequences. So countries are expected to gain from the move. According to the Trump administrations, these are the countries: Poland, Romania, Lithuania, and also Greece. In Tehran, they are already pulling out the familiar manipulations in order to throw obstacles into the wheels of the negotiations. Iran's deputy foreign minister set a new and remarkably convenient condition for sending the delegation to the talks in Pakistan, while linking the arrival of his diplomats to Israel's military in order to protect the freedom of action in Lebanon. And Hezbollah's new fake reports about the launch of cruise missiles at an Israeli Navy ship by the Hezbollah terrorist organization. So Hezbollah claims that it launched a cruise missile at a ship of Israeli Navy and succeeded in hitting it. The IDF completely denies this accusation as a fake news, and the incident never happened, and it makes clear that no naval vessel was ever hit. So, I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth from Israel. As you can see behind me is Jerusalem, and this is day 41 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get our behind-the-scene perspective on what it's like to live in Israel in this war. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani, how should we understand the Israeli operation in Lebanon over the last 24 hours, and especially the elimination of Ali Youssef Harashi and the strikes on the smuggling crossings south of the Litani?
Well, Yair, first of all, it's good to see you again. It's been only a few hours.
Long time, very long time.
Yeah, to your point, Israel and the United States are abundantly clear on one thing, that the war against Hezbollah is not over. We have a stated goal, both on a military level and on the government level, to weaken, push back, and deter Hezbollah long term. What does long term mean? We're not entirely sure, but it means we want to eliminate and take away much of their abilities. Hezbollah has been, and this is important for people to know, for decades, Hezbollah has been the long arm of the Iranian regime on Israel's northern border. They're this corrupt organization that has destroyed the country of Lebanon, has kidnapped Israeli citizens, waged war against us numerous times, and every single time they pretend that they're done, only to be activated when Iran needs the most, which is exactly the case now. And what's really happening here, behind the scenes, is that the Iranians want to preserve what they call this asset, the ability to bring harm to Israel when the time comes or when the time is right. And Israel looks at this and says, absolutely not. We want to remove this threat from the table. We want to do it long term. We don't want Iran to be able to push the red button again and have Hezbollah launch ballistic missiles at Israel. And let me tell you and the people at home what's actually been happening. Today, Hezbollah launched dozens of missiles at Israeli northern communities. Yesterday, the same. The day before that, the same. The war hasn't stopped. Israeli forces, IDF forces, have been fighting Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon and have eliminated over 1,000 of them since this operation started. Why is that? Because there are Hezbollah terrorists there. These are not people that were wandering down the streets with a gun. These are Hezbollah terrorists who are in positions in barracks trying to harm the IDF. And when you look at all those details together, it becomes abundantly clear that there's two things that need to happen. Israel, together with the United States, need to weaken Hezbollah as much as possible. Two, Israel, our government, and our military realize that we don't have forever to carry out this operation. Sometime or another, there's going to be a dead end for this negotiation in which we will have to stop the war in Lebanon or dramatically slow down the war in Lebanon. And because of that, Israel escalated the tempo of bombing missions in the country. Israel has been eliminating Hezbollah terrorists at a fast pace and holding on to as much territory as we can. But, and this is important, Hezbollah has been doing the same. Hezbollah has been using the quote-unquote ceasefire to attack Israeli communities again and again. Hezbollah has been going after IDF soldiers in Lebanon who are in defensive positions, many of them. So this is the reality on the ground. The IDF is doing right now what it has to do, what it should do, what is just, what is right, which is going after the people of Hezbollah that have set their goal to, one, bring destruction and death to Israel. Two, they've done the same to the people of Lebanon. And I want to say one last thing, which is that there needs to be a long-term solution for what's happening in Lebanon. It was supposedly the Lebanese army. They've so far been unable or unwilling, we're not entirely clear, to deal with Hezbollah. They don't have enough equipment. They're not funded well enough. They don't have the resolve to remove them. So Israel is doing the dirty work for the people of Lebanon for this region. And the latest eliminations, well, they're exactly what needed to be done. They're what the doctor prescribed for the health of the people of Lebanon and for the safety of the northern people of Israel, which is removing the leadership of Hezbollah and weakening their infrastructure, their ability to fight, and their manpower capabilities. Hezbollah was and is the most expensive and well-invested asset of proxies that Iran has outside of the borders of its country, and it needs to be treated as such, as the dirty arm of the Iranian evil regime, who's here to cause death and destruction in the land of Israel. And therefore, they should be treated as a terrorist organization that needs to be eradicated, not as some extension to the negotiation taking place with Iran. When they cease to exist, we don't need to fight them anymore. Until that point, there's absolutely no reason to stop or slow down the fight against them.
Can you explain a little bit why is the fact that the IDF discovered this pathway in the Litani River that Hezbollah used to smuggle weapons so important to the security of Israel? And also, geographically, where is that located for our viewers?
So, thank you for asking that, Yael. Lebanon is a very, very mountainous country. So the topography plays a huge part in any kind of defensive measures that Israel would have against Lebanon, which is why much of the discussion about military borders and the position of forces in this war in Lebanon have to do with the names of the rivers or the names of the communities. The first line of defense that we pushed back to was what we call the anti-tank line. The villages, specifically the Shia villages, that look over Jewish communities, and from which, for 2.5 years, Hezbollah has been firing missiles, and anti-tank missiles specifically, at the Israeli communities in northern Israel. But the second line is a line from which Hezbollah launches the short-range missiles or rockets. And that's what people are calling the Litani River. It depends on how you measure, but this is, depending on the line, 15 to 30 kilometers, give or take. Let's say 10 to 20 miles away, a little farther in certain places, a little closer in other areas. Let's call it a dozen miles, give or take, from the Israeli border towards the Litani River. And it's a geographical barrier where we want to push Hezbollah back to make it harder for them to use their short-range mortars, short-range missiles or rockets to harm Israeli communities for two reasons. One, this gives Israel more time to defend itself. It gives our air defense systems more time to arm themselves to respond, both Iron Dome and Light Beam. But two, it also pushes Hezbollah back from the border communities of Israel. And the last part is really the logistical side of it. Hezbollah has built infrastructure in southern Lebanon that parks on top of Jewish communities. I was there, Tomel, our director, we were there inside Hezbollah tunnels last year, and they literally overlook the communities in Israel. And this isn't an accident. They've fortified positions, they've built infrastructure, they've trained terrorists, all for the purpose of having people park exactly on top of the Jewish communities, be able, at the call of an order, to fire mortars, to send anti-tank missiles. And we're talking a couple miles away, 2 miles, 3 miles away, within line of sight. The Israeli armed forces have to push them back and, importantly, remove Hezbollah infrastructure. This latest operation exactly intended at that, and weakening Hezbollah's infrastructure in the southern part of Lebanon, preventing them from bringing south the anti-tank missiles, the sniper rifles, the ballistic, let's call the longer range rockets that they would use to harm Israeli communities. That's the goal here. I want to also be clear about something. The Litani River is not enough. Ultimately, Hezbollah has and can manufacture in the future longer range missiles. But for the meantime, the majority of what they have as weapons, the immediate threat, the threat that's very hard to protect against, the line of sight weapons or the short range, let's call it weaponry, the mortars, the short rockets, short range rockets. We want to push them back enough so they can no longer threaten the Jewish communities on the northern border of Israel. This is important, Yael. There's well over 100,000 Israelis who live in the northern communities over there who we don't want to evacuate again. They were evacuated early in the war. They're back at their homes, and they deserve the safety of being safely in their homes without the threat of Iranian attacks. So to answer your question with too many words, as I typically do, this is really an attempt to cut off the arms of Hezbollah when it comes to logistics and to push them back to prevent their ability to carry out fire attacks against Israel that are so close, so short, that it's hard for Israeli communities to get to a safe shelter, bomb shelter on time. That's really the story here.
Okay, thanks so much. That was very, very helpful. And now I want to shift the attention to what's happening in Iran, because on the one hand, they signal that they're open to negotiations, but on the other hand, they refused to take out the nuclear development from their rights, and they refuse to open the Strait of Hormuz. And then they keep adding more and more conditions. So what does that actually say about the power struggle inside Tehran, for one? And what are the chances of really achieving peace, like Donald Trump is stating again and again?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Yael. There's two main things that are happening here. There's a negotiation component of this conversation, and there's the fact that Iran doesn't seem to be speaking with a single voice. And I'll start with the second one. The Iranian government, for days now, this isn't new, maybe even weeks, I would say, they seem to have a discombobulated leadership, where one side will say something and the other side will say something else. And this is repeated over and over again. Ghalibaf will say, no, we refuse to, but someone else who's talking to the Pakistanis will agree to terms of the agreement. So I'd say, one, that's an indication of how, let's call it, scattered the leadership of Iran has become, mainly because of the elimination of many leaders. Two, probably because of the medical condition of Mujtaba Khamenei, who's still nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be heard from, and apparently in a dire medical condition, if that. He might be no longer with us or in a coma. We're not entirely sure. That's one side. They're not speaking with one voice. The second part of this is there is a disagreement, or there are multiple disagreements between the United States and the Iranian government about what's going to be in the negotiation. The Iranians are doing two things. One, they're trying to best position themselves towards the negotiations. So they're refusing things that they already agreed to. They're, releasing a bunch of PR balloons to see sort of where the wind takes them. And the second part is that they're also trying to create psychological warfare to undermine Trump's government, to weaken the resolve of the U.S. as it enters the negotiations, to shift the public opinion on this topic. I was watching a press conference with Carolyn Levitt, the spokesperson for the White House, just an hour ago, and she very clearly goes against a lot of the things that the Iranian government is saying. She says clearly, these are lies. They're releasing documents that are false. They're claiming to have stated things in the negotiation that were not claimed. They're claiming that there were agreements on things that were not agreed on. So when the Iranians say they want to stick to their nuclear, let's call it enriched uranium, do they really believe that they're going to have it? Or are they possibly positioning themselves, one, to better improve their position internally within Iran, two, to have something they can back down from when the negotiation actually happens over the weekend? I think it's a combination of both of you. It's them not speaking in one voice. Two, it's the Iranians trying to use a lot of, let's call it, PR spins to change the public discourse on this topic and to put pressure on the United States. All in all, I would say this: they still have power in their hands. Still the Strait of Hormuz is not open. There are a handful of ships that are traveling through. There is no restored safety. There is no restored, let's call it, guarantee of safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz. That hasn't happened yet. What has happened is the Iranians have stopped firing ballistic missiles on Israel from Iran, but they continue to do so through Hezbollah in Lebanon, which goes back to our previous point. So again, there's a lot on the table here. It's a complicated situation. And really the best thing to look forward to is what's really going to happen after this summit over the weekend. I think that's really going to give us the best signs of where things are going. Up till that point, there's just so much dust kicked up into the air, so many PR spins, so many ideas that are spread, that it's becoming increasingly harder to find out what's true and what is just a PR spin or an attempt at affecting the psychology of one country or another. What I try to do, Yael, as I listen carefully to the words both of the leaders, but also to the official documents that come out of the different countries, I'd say the US and Israel have been relatively consistent in the documentation and the points that are presented. The Iranians have been all over the place. I mean, literally every 4 or 5 hours, there seem to be new documents that are released from the Iranian regime claiming one outlandish thing after the other. Things as absurd as Trump has given up on Mar-a-Lago as part of the negotiation, or Israel and the U.S. will pay. That wasn't actually there, but it's absurd as that. Or Israel and the U.S. will pay compensation to the Iranians for the financial damage that we caused them, knowing full well that that's absurd because they need to pay us for the damage that they created. They are the aggressors. So there's a lot of PR fluff that's going on, Yael, that needs to be just sort of ignored. I really focus on what the core details are. Two, to look at what's happening on the ground. The U.S. hasn't moved back or withdrawn any of its forces. On the contrary, it is still pushing forces into this region. The second part is the Iranians have stopped firing ballistic missiles and, importantly, have not attacked any of the ships that have been traveling or any of the other Gulf states today, at least. One thing that we need to pay attention to is Hezbollah. Hezbollah does things on behalf of the Iranian regime. They're firing rockets at Israel because Iran wants them to fire rockets at Israel. And Israel wants to stop that, to prevent that. And then we need to just hope, pray, and believe that the U.S. will have enough resolve and enough pressure on the Iranians to dramatically weaken their posture in the negotiations this week and make sure we walk away without them sponsoring terrorism, without them having enriched uranium, and without them having the ability to create a new ballistic missile program once more. That last part, I think, is going to be incredibly difficult. But again, Trump is a master negotiator. We've seen that multiple times. And there's been a lot of pressure on the Iranians. We have to wait and see where this goes.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Matti. I hope that tomorrow we'll have even more input regarding where the ceasefire is heading towards. But we never know here. Every day can turn the whole thing upside down in the Middle East.
Yeah, absolutely, Ariel.
And to those of you that are joining me right now, I'm Yair Pinto. That was Matti Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We are reporting every single day on the TBN Israel YouTube channel. So, first of all, if this is the first time that you see us, make sure to hit the like, the share, and the subscribe button. That's the most important thing, the subscribe button, so that you'll receive daily updates on what is happening here in Israel. As you can see, I'm coming to you from Jerusalem. That's no green screen. That's actually the real view. I'm at the edge of a balcony. Hopefully, will not fall backwards. And just so you know, across Israel, families, especially in the north, are still running to bomb shelters. Children are hearing sirens instead of school bells because Hezbollah terrorists are still launching attacks. This war is not over. There is a ceasefire between Israel and between Iran and the United States, but Hezbollah is not part of it. So many children are not back to schools, especially in the north. And soldiers, they are leaving their homes, including many of our friends, to Lebanon to defend this country against this major Iranian proxy called Hezbollah. This is real. This is happening right now, and Israel needs all of us right now. Because the Bible calls us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Yeah, for this city. And today, that calling is urgent. It requires bold and faithful prayer. And also, it requires action. Israel must know that millions of believers around the world are standing with us, not just in words, but in support, because this is a spiritual war. And the first thing that gets harmed in a war is the truth. So help us share the truth of what's happening from Jerusalem to the nation. That's our vision here at TBN Israel, and we need your help. First of all, in prayers. So, if you have prayers that you'd like to share with us and encourage us, please send them to standwithisrael@tbn.tv. We read every single one. Your prayers strengthen us, and they keep us going here on the ground. We need to know that you are standing with us. And also, if you want to help us create more content from the land of Israel, please consider making a donation at tbn.org/standwithisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/standwithisrael, or call 800-772-5040. So you can pray with us and you can give, and we will create more content, more videos, more updates of what God is doing in this land with all of you. So let's stand with Israel. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And let's act now. And now let's continue with the news, because the targeted elimination, the strike in Beirut, is another night of attacks in southern Lebanon, and the long arm of the IDF and the Israeli Air Force reached straight into Naim Qassem's office, the Secretary General of Hezbollah. Ali Youssef Harassi, the personal secretary and the nephew of Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem, was eliminated in a precise strike in the Beirut area. And at the same time, the Israeli Air Force destroyed two central crossings used by Hezbollah to move thousands of weapons, rockets, and launchers from the north to the south of the Litani River. So, if this is a ceasefire, why is the IDF now deepening the blow against the closest circle around Hezbollah's leadership, and what does that tell us about what could happen in the coming hours with Iran? This is day 41 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And in practice, this does not look like a day of calm. It looks like a day in which every side is trying to lock in the terms of the next round. In the north, the IDF keeps striking. In Tehran, the regime is already looking for room to maneuver out of this agreement. In Washington, Trump is threatening without blinking. And in the middle of all of this, the Strait of Hormuz has still not truly returned to normal. So let us begin in Lebanon, because that is where the most immediate event is unfolding right now. After yesterday's wave of fire, in which more than 100 targets were struck almost simultaneously within around 10 minutes, the full operational picture is now becoming clearer. The idea behind Operation Eternal Darkness was simply and also deadly. Choose a moment when the command rooms, the headquarters, the safe apartments, the waiting rooms, the operation rooms, and then the field commanders would all be heavily manned with personnel, and then strike all of them together without leaving time to escape. The Israeli Air Force concentrated dozens of aircrafts, activated several deception measures, and at 2:15 p.m., the attack began. By the time Hezbollah understood the scale of the event, the wave was already over. The targets were not random. The IDF hit intelligence headquarters, central staffs that used to direct terrorist activities against the IDF forces, and Israeli civilian infrastructure belonging to Hezbollah's fire and naval arrays, and also assets of the Radwan forces and Unit 127, which is Hezbollah's aerial unit in charge of suicide drones and rockets. This was not only a blow to the firepower, it was a blow against the command layer, against the people who synchronize, they approve, they schedule, and connect a field cell to a launch array or to a deeper command center. This morning, one of the names that fell in that operation was confirmed. Ali Youssef Harassi, Naim Qassem's personal secretary and nephew, was eliminated in Beirut. Harassi was not just another office functionary. He was a confidant, a key figure in the security circle, a man involved in managing the office and in the working order around the Secretary General. That is why this hit is not only operational, it is also personal, psychological, and symbolic. The Israeli message here is sharp. If necessary, intelligence can penetrate all the way into the innermost ring around the head of the organization. The strikes did not stop there. During the night, two major crossings used by Hezbollah to move from the north to the south of the Litani were destroyed, together with around 10 weapons depots, launchers, and command centers in southern Lebanon. These were not ordinary bridges and not random roads. These were operational arteries. Through these crossings, thousands of weapons, rockets, and launchers were moved into the southern fighting space opposite Israel. When those crossings go down, the IDF is not just destroying concrete, it is trying to isolate the southern sector, cut the movement, and make it much harder to rearm and to engage with their forward cells. But here too, the picture grows more complicated. By morning, footage had already surfaced showing that a bridge over the Litani River that had been struck was reopened to traffic, apparently with assistance from the Lebanese army. That may sound like a small detail, but it is a very important one because it raises a hard question. Is the Lebanese army really helping dismantle Hezbollah, or on the ground, is it quickly restoring the movement routes for them? Because at the moment, there is no proof here of direct involvement in combat. But there is footage showing that a crossing targeted because of Hezbollah use was reopened very quickly. And that means that the battle over the Litani is not just between the IDF and between Hezbollah, it is also a struggle over what is really happening inside Lebanon's state mechanisms. On the ground, the forces continue to press. Division 98 blocked the Hezbollah regrouping effort in southern Lebanon over the past 2 days. Paratroopers terminated more than 60 terrorists and gained operational control of the area. Fire Brigade 215 terminated more than 70 terrorists. This is including a cell planning mortar fire against the Israeli forces. Forces from Division 162 deepened their ground activity, located a shaft leading to underground infrastructure, eliminated a terrorist cell in face-to-face combat, and raided a site where explosives, rockets, and RPG launchers and grenades were found. In addition, anti-tank launch positions, observation posts, and Hezbollah command centers were destroyed. That matters because it tells us what kind of day this really is. On the one hand, the Air Force is hitting command movement and logistics circles. On the other hand, the ground forces are going after the layer of terrain, shafts, positions, depots, mortar cells, and operational buildings. In other words, this is not just an air power demonstration. It is an effort to strip away one layer after the other. And though all of this, the launches continue. During the morning, close to 20 launches were recorded towards the confrontation line between Israel and Lebanon. And later, alerts continue in the north. That is not a small number. And it also explains why Prime Minister Netanyahu repeated that Israel will continue striking Hezbollah in Jerusalem. They are not willing to let the ceasefire with Iran create any sense of pause against the organization in Lebanon. On the contrary, the ceasefire there has, from Israel's perspective, turned into a window of action. And that is also the American line. Donald Trump said explicitly that Lebanon is not part of the deal. When asked about the strikes in Lebanon, he answered briefly. They were not included in this deal. He later added, because of Hezbollah, they were not included in this deal. We will deal with that as well. It's fine. He also said Israel's strike in Lebanon are part of the deal, and that this is a separate clash. The bottom line is clear. Washington is giving Israel room to operate in Lebanon, even during the pause with Iran. And from here, we move to Tehran. And that is where the story becomes more dangerous. Outwardly, the White House is trying to project that there is a path to an agreement. The White House spokeswoman said that Iran had signaled willingness to transfer its stockpiles of enriched uranium. But in the same breath, she stressed that this is a red line that Trump will not retreat from. In other words, from Washington's point of view, there is no creative compromise here and no vague wordings. There is one clear demand. The uranium leaves and enrichment stops. But from Tehran, a completely different message is coming out. The head of the Iranian Nuclear Development Organization, he announced that there is no intention whatsoever to limit the nuclear program or even to discuss with the United States this issue. This is not just a disagreement over wording. This is a direct collision between the American line and the Iranian line. This is one day before the talks begin. And that is why already now you can see how Iran is beginning to prepare its exit story. On the one hand, it wants to arrive at the negotiations. On the other hand, it is already making sure to signal that it will not agree to what the Americans define as basic foundation. That connects directly to the anger now rising inside the Revolutionary Guards. Mujtaba Khamenei's military advisor, Mohsen Razaei, placed the responsibility on the United States and said that they would not tolerate violations of the ceasefire. The chairman of Iran's Parliamentary Security Committee added a more direct threat. Only fire will teach you. Wait for it. And at the same time, Tehran announced that it may consider withdrawing from the agreement if Israeli strikes in Lebanon continue. Put simply, Iran is already setting a minefield before the talks. If it wants to get up from the table, it will say Lebanon blew everything up. And that's exactly what also happened around the so-called 10-point plan. Iranian media published a document of demands that included, amongst other things, recognition of Iran's right to enrich uranium, compensation, Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, lifting of sanctions, withdrawal of American forces from the region, and a ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon. Trump responded angrily and called the people spreading those documents crooks. He made clear that there is only one set of points acceptable to the United States of America, and those would be discussed behind the closed doors. In other words, in his eyes, the Iranians are not conducting negotiations. They are running propaganda, testing reactions, and trying to drag Washington into a battle over headlines before the parties have even entered the room. Inside Iran itself, it is already deeply felt that the war did not end in victory. Tehran residents woke up to a ceasefire morning and saw a wounded city, damaged buildings, infrastructure hit, and a battered economy. Even conservative voices began speaking openly about the heavy blows that they have taken. That's unusual, because normally the system in Tehran projects full victory, even when the ground is bleeding. Now, it is harder to sell. When the buildings are right in front of the people's eyes and the economy is damaged, even propaganda has to work overtime. And the regime is indeed working overtime, but not only outwardly, inwardly. The machinery of repression is increasing its pace. Iran's judiciary chief called for accelerating the executions and the confiscation of property from those defined as enemy agents. Reports from Evin prison paint a grim picture. Cell doors that are welded shut to prevent escape, shortages of food and medical treatment, severe violence, and even live fire and tear gas use against the inmates. This is a very important detail for understanding today's Tehran. When the military front partially quits, the regime tightens control at home. It understands very well that the danger does not come from the skies, but from the streets. Now comes the bigger question. Who is actually making the decisions in Tehran? Ahead of the Pakistan talks, the answer is critical. At the center of the circle stands Mujtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader. Around him operates a narrow ring. Parliament Speaker Muhammad Bakr Kalibaf, considered a key figure and perhaps the number 2 man in the system. IRGC Commander Ahmed Vahidi, who represents a more radical line. President Masoud Pezeshkian, and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is representing Iran in the talks. But even when the names are known, the dynamics remain complex. In Tehran, decisions are made on the basis of consensus inside a very narrow circle, with Mujtaba having the final word, but the Revolutionary Guard still holding dramatic influence. So anyone trying to understand whether Iran is heading towards a deal or renewed war needs to look less at the speeches and more at the balance inside that circle. And meanwhile, as long as they argue, Trump is keeping all options on the table. He wrote that all ships, planes, military personnel, ammunitions, and weapons will remain in place in and around Iran until the real agreement is fully implemented. And he threatened again, if for any reason that does not happen, the shooting will resume, bigger, better, and stronger than anything ever seen before. That message is aimed at Iran and at the entire region around it. The ceasefire is not viewed in the White House as the end of the campaign. It is viewed as a final opportunity. The IDF is reading it exactly the same way. A military source made clear today that despite the ceasefire, Iran remains the primary arena and Lebanon the secondary one. He warned that Iran will soon act to restore capabilities that were damaged, especially ballistic missile arrays and air defensive systems. According to him, the Air Force is ready within a minute to renew the fighting, both defensively and offensively. He stressed that these days allow Israel to reorganize, accumulate more strength, and continuously monitor what is happening in Iran. In other words, from the IDF's perspective, the ceasefire is not rest. It is a preparation phase. And that applies both to resupply and to a partial return to routine. The pause gives Israel airspace, recovery time, the ability to close gaps, and freedom of shift for more resources to shift them from Iran into Lebanon. The IDF is saying openly that it can now bring more Air Force capabilities, military intelligence capabilities, and operations directorate capabilities to the Lebanese arena. So, what for a moment looked like a break in the war with Iran has in practice become a force multiplier against Hezbollah. And yet, at the same time, Iran is doing exactly what Iran always does, not only in the nuclear field, also in the sea. The Strait of Hormuz is still not truly open. Iran is now demanding that tankers report in advance on their cargo, receive approval, and then pay transit fees in digital currency, mainly Bitcoin and sometimes yuan. And according to reports, radio warnings are broadcasted on maritime frequencies. Any vessel passing without approval will be attacked. In Tehran, they tried to explain this by saying it meant to ensure no weapons passed during the ceasefire, and that there are also technical limitations because of naval mines that are still scattered in the area. But the bottom line is simple. Iran has not truly opened the strait. It is trying to turn an international shipping lane into a controlled, taxed, and threatened corridor. That is why the economic pressure remains so sharp. According to open source estimates, the last 6 weeks have cost Iran between $140 and $145 billion. Some assessments already speak of $150 billion whole. And at the same time, reports point to damage to more than 66% of the missiles and the drone production sites and the shipyards, severe damage to the fleet, destructions of 160 to 190 ballistic missile launchers, strikes on the nuclear program, and more than 4,000 civilian buildings that are damaged. These are not just nice numbers for a slide deck. This is the pressure that is now setting on Tehran's decision-making table. And Trump is adding another lever of this pressure. He announced a dramatic move. Any country supplying military weapons to Iran will face an immediate 50% tariff on all products that are sold to the United States. That move is aimed mainly at suppliers of components, chips, navigation systems, chemical materials, and technological know-how flowing to Tehran. In other words, Washington is not only threatening Iran itself, it is threatening the ones keeping Iran's production line alive. The broader international arena is also shaking. In the United States, there is serious discussion of withdrawing American forces from NATO and from NATO member states that did not help in this war against Iran and relocating them to states that were more supportive. The countries mentioned as potentially affected include France, Italy, and Spain. Those that may benefit include Poland, Romania, Lithuania, and Greece. Trump also again attacked NATO, saying they were not there when America needed them. That may look distant from the fighting in Lebanon, but it is not, because from the White House perspective, the campaign against Iran exposed who truly stands with Washington when it comes to the Middle East, to Hormuz, and to the energy markets. And in the diplomatic arena, Israel scored a clear achievement today. Iran tried to block Israel in the elections to a series of United Nations bodies, with special focus on the Commission on the Status of Women. It sent an official document, ran a diplomatic campaign, tried to steer resistance, and tried to damage Israel's legitimacy. In the end, it failed. Israel was elected to every body for which it put itself forward. This is including the Commission on the Status of Women. From Jerusalem's point of view, it was not just a vote. It was a direct answer to Tehran's attempts to manufacture diplomatic isolation during this war. And before we move on, if you appreciate this reporting and everything that we do at TBN Israel, make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube. Make sure to give us a like, share this content, and if you want to see this war through our eyes, look for Yair Pinto and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms, so you never miss another update of what's happening and know how to pray for the situation. And before we close, just one more point from the northern arena. Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, so they released the footage and claimed that it launched a cruise missile at an Israeli Navy ship and hit it. The IDF flatly denies it. They state that no Israeli vessel was hit and that at no point was there any threat to an Israeli ship or one near it. And at the same time, security officials say that they are examining the possibility that a missile may have been launched at a foreign vessel and missed. So, for now, this looks like another propaganda move designed to project an achievement, while on the ground, the organization is taking more and more blows. And before we go on, this is the moment to ask all of you to stand with us. We need your help. We need your help in sharing the truth. And above all, we need your help in prayer. So, I understood at least, that this war is a spiritual war. It's the only explanation that I got. So, when we are fighting a spiritual war, we pray, and God is listening. So I encourage all of you to unite in prayer for wisdom to our leaders, for the IDF soldiers, for all the children that went back to school in most of the areas in Israel, not in the north yet. Let's pray for them. Let's pray for the people of Iran. They need all the prayers that they can get. And let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.